Well, there aren't any trainers here tonight who don't train on a regular basis. Ken Anderson, I would say, is part-time. But he's also available. He's unique in that he will go to all the different rings. So if you want to take a lesson at Dapplegray, he'll be there. If you want to take a lesson at Chandler, he'll come here. If you want to take a lesson at Howlett, he'll be over there because we have the dressage ring. So he's very popular, and he does a great job. But he does very specifically part-time because he has a regular job.
All right, well,
Okay.
I understand. So, I mean, that's what your view of the trainers that we have. Their part-times are doing 10 hours a week, and full-times are doing almost 40 hours a week. That's what you say?
I would say that's, yeah, a good approximation.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Susan.
There was an allegation made tonight that there are trainers, people training in the rings that are not legal. And I thought that years ago, when I was the chair of the Equestrian Committee, that we thought that it was proper to have a very visible tag hanging on their neck of the trainers. And I must say, I live at almost at the corner of Dapplegray ring, and I'm not sure I've ever seen one of those. Are they in use?
We have.
And how does that work?
We have taken photo IDs, and they're laminated for every trainer who has a current business license, and then we've provided them with it's sort of like, it kind of looks like a badge, and they can wear it either on like I guess a long string, which a few of them said they didn't really want it flopping around while they were riding. So they're required to have it on their person. I don't know that anyone's ever really checked, but I've seen a few people have them on clips on their pants. The unlicensed trainers, of course, wouldn't have that, so they're not carrying any.
So how is it possible for the city to enforce this?
It's very difficult. It would require constant monitoring by code enforcement.
Okay.
What's the
That's right,
other?
go ahead.
What's the other category of individuals that we've heard about? What's that? I've never. What's exercise? What is that?
How many are those?
Well, okay, we get complaints from people who have purchased a business license as a trainer, and they've got the liability insurance, and they've done everything properly, and they're being undermined by people who come in and offer close to the same services they do without the actual riding lessons. So you might get someone who comes in and where, say, Rich Oldroyd is paying for training, and the trainer's riding his horse or his daughter's horse and then training his daughter. You might get someone who comes in and says, well, I'll exercise your horse and ride it. I won't give your daughter a lesson for a quarter of what you're paying your trainer. And they will actually get customers that way. Or they'll go into what I call the backyards. They go from backyard to backyard, and they'll have like a route where they'll get 4 horses out on somebody's different residences on Dapplegray. Then they'll move over to Buckskin and get a few horses out. They ride them on the trail. Maybe they give them a bath, they take them up to the ring, let them run around, whatever it is that the owners want to have the horses do. They're providing that service for exercising and grooming type services.
But are they using the rings a lot, the city's rings?
We get reports from the trainers that they are using the rings.
Gracious. Stephen.
There's some concern. This seems reasonable to me, and I'd like to hear your response to it on 2 issues. There are some other things we can discuss that I'd like to discuss further with council, but 2 questions for you. And one is people who are concerned that if trainers are not allowed to use facilities on the designated days, that could result in overcrowding on the days that they are allowed to participate. I'd just like to hear, because you're closer to it, you see the numbers, you understand certainly better than I what's going on. What are your feelings about that?
Well, if the trainers follow the protocol that we have in place now, which says that there are no more than 2 trainers per ring, just as an example, Chandler Park, no more than 2 trainers in the ring with no more than 2 lessons, or no more than 2 students in a lesson, that wouldn't change. So if there were no lessons on one day, the next day should not be impacted by people trying to crowd in there, because the same rules would apply to the same trainers. No more than 2 trainers, no more than 2 students.
But wouldn't that, I mean, and granted, I'll say, but wouldn't that mean that some trainers who otherwise could have made a lesson, had a lesson on one of the designated days, even if they're following the rules, because there's only 2 at a time, wouldn't be able to on another day because they need to follow the rules two at a time. I mean, this is something that we need to think about. So what I'm hearing from you is, well, in terms of my walking up there and looking, no. But it could be in the background. Some trainers are not able to provide lessons on the free days if we do what's proposed. Is that a true statement or not?
I think the trainers could provide lessons at any one of the rings that was not under restriction, whether they were only focused on a certain ring, like say Chandler Ring, just because it's in the area where their students are. That would cause some restrictions. I think it would be more of a student restriction rather than a trainer.
If I could maybe just tag on to that thought, I know people are rightfully concerned with the impact that these restrictions would have on the trainers, but recall that the Equestrian Committee and the Park and Activities Commission's thinking was to free up space for the casual recreational rider. And I think that's the flip side of Steve's question there.
Right. The children who would normally maybe take lessons or not take lessons but not be in the ring would then have that time to be able to ride. So they wouldn't, the riders would not be forced to go and ride other places if they didn't want to take a lesson. They would have the ring available to ride.
What's your general sense, since we're hearing here from the trainer community, and in fact there's been this implied kind of identity between children who take lessons and children who ride horses, and of course that's exactly what this is all about, is trying to make sure that as many people who ride horses, and I think a lot of them are young people, have access to the rings, and that kids who don't take lessons not be denied access to those rings. And so it's certainly not an equestrian or anti-equestrian question here. It's a question of how do we get the most access? I mean, I think that's really the question. And I must say in that regard that there was, in the Equestrian Subcommittee meeting, general consensus that the survey wasn't a good survey, and the decision was made because of discussion that was based upon people's general experience. Most of the people on the committee ride a lot. They see what's going on, so they pushed the survey aside and made a decision, which may or may not have been all good or all bad, or it may have been either. We need to decide that. But what is your sense of kids, whatever, 12 to 18, who are out there riding on weekend nights? How many of those are there under instruction, and how many aren't? I mean, are the majority of kids getting instruction or not getting instruction most of the days they're riding?
Are you talking about the after-school time, or?
Yeah, the time that we're talking about here, the after-school time. Are most of the children, do they have trainers, or do the majority not have trainers? Because I think that's an important thing for us to think about.
The majority of the kids who ride after school in the rings are riding with trainers because the trainers are there. The kids who don't take lessons and don't ride are not there as much because what we're being told is the rings are overcrowded and it's not available for them to be riding. So if, say, a kid was going to go to Dapple Gray and they wanted to jump their horse and without instruction, they would have to work themselves in around lessons that were going on, and a lot of them aren't comfortable doing that. I'm not comfortable having them jump without instruction, so just, that's my opinion, but our rings are open for everybody to use, so a lot of people try and go to Howlett, and one reason I was going to tell, I think it was Susie that said Howlett was underutilized. Howlett Park is so big with 4 riding rings that are all extremely large rings because it was designed for horse shows. Even if there are 6 people over there, it looks empty. Whereas if you had 6 people at Chandler, it would look very crowded. So, I mean, Howlett is quite popular. It's